What is good, YouTube? Quinn Wade basketball analysis coming to y'all. With that quick analysis, we got the rundown. Obviously, I gave y'all my rookies. Now I'm about to tell y'all about the league. Obviously, I've been gone for a long time until yesterday. Well, really, Sunday. And I'm about to pretty much tell y'all how I've been feeling about teams and who has been good, why they haven't been good. Just give y'all the rundown and the knowledge that y'all see and why things happen. The Bulls, obviously losing a lot of players. Caruso goes down, Lonzo goes down. But DeRozan has proven to be one of the best players in the league again, as he has always been. But he has took his game to another level. That's why he put himself in the MVP conversation, even though he has went back down on that. But he's an all-star starter, not only because they did cheat his position a little bit, but also because he continued to trust his game. He knows his spots. He knows his game. He has continued to be what he has always been and just continue to sell and maximize that and become the best version of himself. Now, obviously, him and Levine kind of was a question. How will they fit? How will their roles go? And these people pretty much figured it out pretty early. Vucevic's defense haven't been great, but he's still been a good force inside, also being able to get you some perimeter shots. This team has played better as a team than we all thought. Nobody thought that the Bulls coming into this season would be the number one seed in the NBA when it comes to the Eastern Conference. And clearly, nobody thought that they literally be all the way at this point to the top where all the people in and out of the lineup. People looked at this team as a team that wasn't that deep, a team that didn't play defense, a team that had a lot of things that they had to figure out. And they did have some lumps and some good starts, especially to this season. And now they pretty much balancing out. Even though guys been out, we always tell you don't make excuses. Wherever you on the court with, that's who you got to go to war with. Injuries happen, trades happen. You still got to go out there and produce and do the best you can to win games. And the Bulls are, a team that made no excuses. They went out there, no matter who suited up, who was available. They just kept going to war, kept going to battle, and they just continue to win games. Now, you got two guys that can control the game, score, and really just make it difficult. And you just got good pieces around them. We didn't know how it was going to fit. We didn't really know how it was going to be. We know questions with coaches was going to be to the table at this point. But I don't think they have that many questions at this point. We just going to have to see where they finish. Obviously, we're not, close to ending the season just yet. So we'll see where they finish. Obviously, a lot of people thought they'd be in the play-in range. They thought they'd be in the 8th, 7th spot. But they have defied expectations from the beginning of the season and pretty much have been pretty good. So I give them credit. We'll see what they do the next couple months and see where they finish. But the Bulls have been probably the biggest surprise this year just because nobody actually knew what the Bulls was going to be. They was probably the team that had a high ceiling. They also had a team where we just thought they could be just another good team in the East. Like, there's a bunch of them, obviously, you can see. But they actually been one of the best teams in the East, which we knew was a possibility, but it's actually reality. So it's a difference thinking and actually knowing it for sure. Miami, they was number one, but now they fall to number two. This was a team that we all looked at as contenders. They brought back the same pieces. Duncan, Tyler, Jimmy, obviously Bam, had the same coach. So the main core pieces was there. They obviously added Tucker and added some other pieces as the season went on, and also through free agency that just, switched how they can defend. And, Tyler Hero had a breakout season so far, especially off the bench. He was a guy that a lot of people looked at as a question mark, what he's going to be, what type of season he's going to have. And he finally had the season that a lot of people thought he was capable of. Jimmy has been a big problem for this team as he has been the best player on the team. The problem is he just hasn't been able to stay healthy for at least 4 weeks. He hasn't even gave us, a month of great basketball in a long time. So when he comes, he looks amazing. He looks like one of the best players in the league, which he has been the last couple seasons. The problem is he hasn't played much. Bam hasn't played much either. He just came back and he doesn't look terrible. He looks solid. Still not that defensive anchor that he was last season, but he still has time to figure it out. Plus, his team hasn't got everybody else on the court yet. Kyle Lowry hasn't been that huge piece that we thought, but also hasn't been a terrible addition. We had to see when everybody gets on the court and get healthy. This team is really going to be based on what they do in the playoffs. This team is one of those teams where we think they're good enough to win it. They're good enough to get to the finals. They're good enough to get to the conference finals. We just got to see matchups, who they play against. Is this team really ready to really play their best basketball? Obviously, they played their best basketball in the bubble. They kind of embarrassed themselves last year against the Bucks. and now they made a lot of changes to this roster and how it's played, and even the starting lineup. Now we actually have to see when they're all healthy, what are they really, a team that's up there with the Bucks and the Nets as a team that can win it all. I do believe it, but we also do have to see it at the same time. So when playoff time come, we'll find out. The Sixers have been a little bit of surprise as they got off to a good start, and they fell off a little bit and got off to a nice run, and then they got off to this point where they're 8-2. Embiid didn't even play last game, and they still won. And they're 31-19. They third in the Eastern Conference. A lot of people liked it. Philly, I still don't look at them as a contender. They got a lot of good pieces around Embiid. Embiid is playing his best basketball. As you know, he's a guy that we never know is going to happen. He solved a lot of his problems, being able to, score in a double team, being able to be, aggressive, being able to look for a shot. But this is different because this is his team. Last year, he got a lot of shots and got a lot of opportunities, and he showed out, was an MVP conversation. The problem is he missed a lot of games last year and also kind of flopped in the playoffs, just like a lot of other players on this roster, and came up, small when he was supposed to be the franchise guy and the number one team in the NBA. He faltered in like he usually do. Now we just got to see how this season go, where they finish. What they actually do in the playoffs is going to matter. Because like I said, Ben Simmons shouldn't come back. I would definitely agree. He won't come back this season and play one game this season. That's the right decision for him to do. And I believe that he will do it as he has done it all season. I hope he continue to do it. But at the same time, this team has really just went out there and just played. Steph Curry has had one of his best seasons. Tobias Harris hasn't been that great, but he's still trying to go out there and contribute. And you look at Maxey having the best season of his career. Obviously, the minutes was going to be there. He just going to have to produce. And he had times where he looked great, times where he looked okay, and times where he looked like he can literally be, probably a big player in this league a couple years from now. So we'll see. They got a lot of veterans. They got a coach that has won games with role players and one star player, or even with a bunch of role players, and even made it to the playoffs before in a tougher conference. So I'm not really surprised that they're successful. But like I said, this team has been up and down all season. So even though they're third now, we still have to see, can they keep it up. Cleveland has been one of the biggest surprises in the East, as they have been a playoff team basically all season. Nobody expected them to be in the top 5, and that's where they are now. We still have to see where they finish. Garland has finally had that season that we knew he'd eventually get to. We had just when he was actually going to be able to do it, so he's not really surprising much. This team has went through a lot. A lot of guys missing, a lot of guys not playing. Mobley has been a solid role player for them. Jared Allen has filled that middle, protecting the paint, finishing, rebounding, and even guys have came in and contribute off the bench and really did well. And you got to give a lot of credit to the guys that stepped up. Guys been in and out. Guys been out for the season, but they didn't make no excuses. They didn't make no complaints. They just went out there, went to war, did the best they could, improved defensively, and their offense looked a lot better than what we all thought. Cleveland is a team that usually falls off. This year was different. They stayed in, they stayed winning, and they have proved a lot of their doubters wrong, including me so far. But the season isn't over. They should make the playoffs as they 11 games above 500. But we still have to see how they finish. Like I said, they might finish top 6. They might finish 7th, 8th. They might finish top 4. We don't know. But that's why you play the games. The Bucks also have been a team that have been ravaged by injuries and COVID. 1 minute they got everybody back together, then Brook Lopez goes out, then they got COVID, then Giannis against the world, and guys come back and they rise back up, and then it looks like Giannis going to be the MVP, and then they win and then lose a couple games. Now you can see that they 5-5 in their last 10 games. They haven't been great, but this team is hard to figure out. Even when we watch them in the playoffs, 1 minute it look like they the best team, 1 minute they look like they're a shooting team, 1 minute it look like they can do whatever they want to do, and even defensively they can get it going and lock you up and stop you, and 1 minute they can't stop a fly from flying right in front of you. So I don't really know. But the thing about the Bucks, they always been one of them teams where they have enough to get it done. They just actually have to put it all together, which is coaching, and it is preparation, and it is personnel, of what they're really trying to do each and game, because obviously when playoffs is based off game plan and the team you're playing against each and every night, which does change as you go through in the playoffs, and every time teams do change lineups like we've seen the Bucks do last year too. But they got a lot healthier. They got a lot of their guys back. Now we just have to see what they are, or what are they? Are they going to climb back to the top and stay? Or are they going to finish in the middle? Is they even gonna get home court advantage? I'm not really questioning the Bucks. I just want to see where they're gonna be, just like these other teams when it's finished. We only in February. We got a couple more months to go. So the Bucks, I'm pretty sure they'd be fine if they're healthy. I just want to see where they finish. A lot of people had the Bucks at number 1 or number 2 finishing this year. They've been around there, but they also been in the middle and the bottom too. So the Bucks had an ugly up and down inconsistent season. Not the type of season you want to have when you're the defending champs. You want to send a statement that it wasn't a fluke, and they had a lot of questions even now, and we don't even know when Brook Lopez coming back and how he's going to be when he comes back, and they really have missed him in the middle. Brooklyn, this team, a lot of people thought they was going to come in and just run the league. And at one point, they was number 1 in the East for a long period of time. And then they started falling off. KD's down. Kyrie was missed basically the whole season, which is about half of it. And then James Harden is out now. And then he also hasn't been the same Harden that we're accustomed to. And then Patty Mills came in, but Joe Harris and other guys are out. So this team, we never really got to see healthy. We never really got to see they big three all on the court at once, which is part of the game. But at the same time, this team is just going to be judged about how they play in the playoffs and what can they accomplish. This team was put together with Kyrie and KD to try to bring a title to Brooklyn, and obviously James Harden joined that the next year. And this year they had the expectations of they should have won it last year. They didn't get it done, so they should be able to win it this year. And they have done, like the Bucks, they have done the complete opposite. Now they can still get healthy and make a playoff run and win it, but right now they haven't played great basketball all season. I even felt like when they was number 1, I didn't look at them as the best team in the league, even though they had the best record in the Eastern Conference. They didn't really look that great. KD has looked well when he has played. Harden started figuring it out as the season kept going, which usually happens. And Kyrie hasn't looked terrible. Still has looked like an all-star caliber player, even though he's not going to play majority of the games as he has already hasn't. And he's still not going to play the other games because the COVID vaccination thing is not done. So this team really is just a mess. If Kyrie's not going to play all the games, including the playoffs, then this is just not going to be the same team. And if it's not going to be the same team, then, they most likely won't win the title this year, but we have to see how things shake out. Charlotte, I figured that they will be a playoff team around this spot, and they pretty much been solid. Rookie of the year, LaMelo Ball came back and had a better season, learned some things, grinded. Miles Bridges finally put together a consistent season so far. Got off to a high start, cooled down a little bit, but has been a solid player for them. Definitely a starter that they can rely on, something that's been questionable for him. But I say he's a guy to watch out for coming into the season, and he ended up being decent as a starter. Gordon Hayward still questionable, has been solid when has played. The problem is the guy just hasn't played much still. You still got Terry Rozier having his games where he looks amazing, having his games where he doesn't shoot the ball well. Still trying to figure out what they're going to do in the paint. Still don't have a great rim protector or a rebounder in that center position. And on top of that, they get a little bit of inconsistency from their bench. But this is a young team. They fight. They play hard. They try to do whatever they can to stay in games. And they don't really have a superstar or a guy that they can really depend on consistently to dominate at this point. But, they're still developing and growing, so they can figure that out later. But 7 seed is good considering that they made the playoffs last year and they should have. But they got knocked out. Toronto, this is a team that's led by veterans. This team has been in and out of the playoff spots and playing spots and even lower than that. But they got healthier. Siakam starting to play like his old self. Fred VanVleet playing his best basketball of his career. OG playing the best basketball of his career. Scotty Barnes has been better than what we thought. Role players been in and out, but they have been solid. Nick Nurse has been a guy that hasn't gave up or quit, just went out there and said, this is what we got. We're going to try to do the best we can. I thought Toronto would be in this conversation, but like I said, we are in that part where they figured out a couple of wins. They 5-5 and they last 10, so they haven't had the most amazing 2 weeks as they went 500, but it was enough, to get them 8 for right now. We'll just have to see what they're going to be. Will they be in the play-in? If they in the play-in, can they play in? What they can do as a playoff team, which is most likely get put out in the first round or not even make it at all. But a lot of these teams are in that same area where they're good enough to win 4 or 5 in a row. They're good enough to lose 3 in a row. And that will really just determine who's going to be the 8th and the 7th seed at the end of the day. Same with the Celtics. This team has looked like a mess. A lot of guys been in and out, whether it's COVID or injuries. They've really been trying to put a lot of guys on the court. Jaylen Brown missed a lot of time, and he has come back and still been able to score. Hasn't been as efficient, but has also not been the defender that he usually is, but also hasn't been terrible. Tatum having his worst offensive season, still scoring a lot of points, still having big games, but still having a lot of games where he just can't make a shot from 3 or from the mid-range, but we still got to believe in him, as we still 2 games above 500 and hasn't played our best basketball yet. Hasn't been consistent. Like I said, that's been the biggest problem with the Celtics. They haven't been great defensively, haven't been great offensively, can't rely on Jaylen Brown every night, can't rely on Jason Tatum every night either. So that was a problem I said that they was going to have coming into this season. Will this be the season where one of these guys become a superstar, the dependable dominant force? And the answer is no. Jaylen Brown still has his game. Tatum has his games, but they usually don't have great games together. They usually don't have great games every game or even dominant games all the time. So they still stars, all stars, but not superstars yet. It's part of the growing process. It's part of the learning curve. And, you know, even though they still winning and still figuring it out as they are young, that's still an evolution that we have to see if they're going to take and see if one of them does or both of them does, and the team can be a title team. But until they figure that part out, they're going to be a good team like they've been the last 2 years with them as the best player, which has been around the 7th and 8th seed or out of the playoffs. Atlanta Hawks has been probably one of the most disappointing teams, honestly, coming into this season. Trae Young obviously didn't make the All-Star team or All-NBA team this year. He's already on the All-Star starter, so he's already on the All-Star team for sure coming into this video. Really had a breakout season. This team is just a mess. Like, I don't really, like I said, just like 2 years ago, I'm not going to put the blame on Trae Young. John Collins hasn't been that guy that wanted the money and deserved it, as he hasn't even been an all-star caliber player this year. Clint Capella, you know, he hasn't played a lot, and when he has played, he hasn't been that same glue guy that really fit everything they needed, whether it was switching, protecting the basket, or just keeping guys out of the paint and just keeping them on the perimeter. Then the problem is they can't keep nobody, you know, on the perimeter because they can do whatever they want to do. This is one of the worst defensive teams. That's always been their biggest problem. The upside to it was their offense. What is the problem is Bogdanovich is gone, Herter is gone, Cam Reddish is gone now. DeAndre Hunter, their best perimeter defender, hasn't played. So they perimeter players that they paid all this money rely on, besides Trae Young, has just been in and out of the lineup all season, and it just has been a mess. This team has always been a bad defensive team. They have improved to an okay one at best and haven't even been able to do that consistently. But when their offense isn't clicking the way that it was, where they can get a shot every possession that's decent, or Trae Young is just going to find a way to manipulate the rules or the system, or just score because he can get to his floater or his mid-range or his 3 or to free throw line. They don't really have that, as a lot of those rules have changed. Plus, the personnel hasn't been on the court enough with Trae Young because they've been out of the lineup. So this year has really just been a mess for the Hawks, and that's why they have been struggling. The Knicks have been, on the other hand, they improved a lot of their team coming into the season. Kemba did not pay off the way that they thought. They thought bringing in Kemba was going to really help their offense. He ended up coming off the bench. Evan Fournier has been, like I said, he got a lot of money, but we knew he was a role player at best, and he was coming off the bench in Boston, and they made him a starter and paid him a lot of money, and Evan Fournier hasn't been able to be that consistent force. Julius Randle had a down year. He was an All-NBA, All-Star, most improved player yet last year. Not even an All-Star off the bench this year. Hasn't been dominant, haven't been taking over and lifting them. Hasn't been terrible, but just also haven't been the guy that we thought that he would be. This team played hard, did whatever they could and fought, you know, last year. This year, they just don't have the effort. They just don't have the energy. They just don't have the intensity. They're not grinding. They're not fighting. They're not doing whatever it can to make games ugly. They're just out there just, you know, executing. And execution works, but you still got to put the fight and the effort and the grittiness, and they just don't have that this year. You know, games are, you know, getting out of control, or they just not getting control of them, or they letting games go. It just don't seem like they have the passion and the love and the care and the will that they really, you know, showed last year. And that's really what was their identity. Makes things tough, makes things ugly, and let's just go to war. And this year they just are more looser, they just a little bit more comfortable, and they just don't have that ugliness in them. And that's why they just haven't been the same. You know, a lot of the roster and a lot of personnel is the same, but they just haven't had the same personality as an entire team. And they look a little softer too. You know, that's a problem with this Knicks team. That was the difference. You had to come at them. You had to literally earn a bucket. This year, they just been the complete opposite, you know, regardless of who their lineup has been. That's just been the Knicks this year, and that's why they have been, out of the playoffs, not even in the play-in conversation. The Wizards, they was obviously in the playoffs for the majority of the year. They got off to a hot start. I told you guys I wasn't high on the Wizards when they got off to a hot start. Not because they was trash or I thought they was terrible, but it was only the first month of the season when you got a couple more months to go. So I didn't really want to go too crazy, especially because we didn't really see too much of this Wizards team because the problem with them was they had a lot of new pieces and a new coach. So we had to see what things would go as the season comes, who's going to adjust, who's going to fall off, who's really going to show themselves. And we started seeing that a lot of their role players got off to hot starts, cooled off a little bit. Bradley Beal never got going. Like, he's not even going to be an all-star this year. Hasn't had that dominant breakout season that he had the last 2 years. This is a guy that won a scoring title and was in the conversation to win it last year and hasn't had that season at all. Free throws are down, efficiency are down, 3 points down. He just hasn't been that same aggressive, I can do whatever I want to the defense, they can't do nothing about it type of mentality that he had the last 2 seasons. And when he's not dominating, he's not leading, you don't have nobody that can really step up consistently as their role players, have good games inconsistently every game. You don't know who's going to be big, who's going to show up, who's going to help. And then your star has that same problem. That cause losses, especially when you're not a great defensive team and you don't really know who's going to bring it every game offensively. You're going to have problems, winning a lot of games. They still not out of it. Obviously, they lost their last 5, so it looks a lot worse, and Bradley Beal isn't even playing now because he's injured. So this is a team that can win 4 in a row and be back in the conversation. This is a team that can literally be in this position where they're hopeless, where they're going to go out there and compete. They're going to go out there and try, and that might get them in the play-in conversation, but they also aren't good enough to, really make a real run. So the problem with them is they starting to lose a lot of games, plus Bradley Beal is out. If they can't get it going or get on another win streak, they can find themselves in a position where, the other teams might build too much of a gap for them to literally make a run. But it's still a little early on that, as it's only February and the month is not even close to be over. It's the beginning. The Pacers have been worse, I thought, but they also had a lot of problems. Karis LeVert and a lot of guys weren't even available when the season started, and they started getting those guys back, so they started winning. The problem is they dug themselves in such a hole that they're still trying to figure out a way to get out of it. This team is literally 4 games behind the Wizards, who just lost 5 in a row. That just show you how miserable and how bad this Pacers team has been this entire season. It's not a Rick Carlisle problem. It's just the East got better problem and they didn't. And by them not getting better, they just struggled defensively, struggled to score. And Sabonis hasn't been a dominant force ever, but he has also been a good, reliable piece. And when you got guys that's in and out around him and guys that can't really shoot and guys that can't really create, guys that can't really do much for him, or it just comes to a point where you just self-combust. And this team has really been ugly to watch. They have been a team that struggles to even get buckets, struggles to even find out what they should do. And a lot of it just has to do with personnel. They don't really have guys that can really create and do much, offensively and carry a load outside of Sabonis, but he's not even a dominant, reliable force offensively either. And when that's your best player, you don't have other great support players around them, you're just going to compete. So they won 19 games so far. They still can go on a win streak. They still can make a trade. But it's clear that this team had inherent problems just coming into the season, not having everybody healthy, and that helped them lose a lot of games. And then it's just been an uphill battle trying to get everybody on the same page. And then you just realize they don't have a lot of great or good players. They got a lot of good players, not a lot of great or amazing players, I should say. And that's been a problem, especially when you're not a great defensive team on top of that. And you don't really have no reliable players offensively either. The Pistons, I thought they'd be one of the worst teams, and they have been. They haven't really had much. Like I said, this is one of the worst offensive teams. This is one of the worst defensive teams in the league, and they don't really have a rim protector or a great rebounder. They don't really have great offensive players, and they don't really have guys that can get a lot of buckets. So Sadiq Bey has been solid as a starter. Grant has missed a significant amount of time. Killian Hayes has been as bad as he has been in other seasons. Other guys have came in and haven't been great in production. Cade has did pretty much all he can as a rookie. He's only 20 years old. This is his first season. He hasn't even grabbed off to the great start. He's just starting to figure it out too and put together some big games. But we knew this team would be bad. They don't have a lot of talent. He doesn't have a lot of help, and a lot of guys, are just better than them. This team has guys is going to compete. They're going to do whatever they can. But ultimately, this team just falls short of not having enough talent, not having enough defense, not having enough shooting, not having enough spacing, and ultimately not having enough. And usually that's why you lose, when you don't have enough in the league. Same with the Magic. Don't have a lot of shooting, don't have a lot of spacing, don't have no defense. And when you can't score a lot, can't rely on a lot of guys offensively, you can't defend at all, you're going to lose a lot of games. And, the best part about the Magic is this was a tryout season. Like I said, let's see what we got with Mo Bamba. Let's see what we got with Suggs. Let's see what we got with Cole Anthony. Let's see what we got with Franz. Let's try out Mo Wagner and a lot of these other guys. And I feel like that's the thing that the Magic fans should just look at. We knew that Isaac and Markelle Fultz and these other guys was going to be out for majority of the season, if not all of it. Let's just see who should stay, who should go, and who should we really build around. And that's what you should be focusing on within the next 3 years for the Magic. How can these guys improve? Let them work out. Let them study film. Let them go out there and play games and, learn from their mistake and grow, hold them accountable, and let them continue to, play through them. And that's what they have done. So I don't look at the Magic and the Pistons as terrible. There's got a lot of young players that got to learn how to win, learn a game, learn how to get better at the game, and just keep developing. So these teams are supposed to be bad. These, to me, was the two worst teams in the conference before the season started, and they are obviously the two worst teams now. But like I said, a lot of these guys are so young and haven't even been in the league for 4 years total. Some of these guys are rookies or sophomores that this is what you expect, especially when a lot of them is not even as good as it's going to be, in the future. And most of them probably won't even be on the team in Orlando, as they have so much young talent, plus they got to add more through the draft. They're going to have to consolidate and get rid of some anyway and trade them for somebody else, or figure out who's better than others before they can pay them, and then build a roster within 4 to 5 years that look totally different than it does this year. So Orlando just got to figure out what's good, what's not, who fits, who doesn't, and continue to build upon that each and every draft and each and every free agency in the future. Phoenix Suns, number one, not really a surprise. I thought they had finished 1 or 2. I didn't think they'd be 40 and 9, and they have won their last 10. But I thought this team would be one of the easiest teams to predict to be good. They had the same roster as last year. They hungry. They lost in the finals, where I honestly felt like they was a better team and they should have won. But they really blew it, and they really took that on a mission. Chris Paul has been one of the greatest players ever, and he continues to show that he's one of the greatest leaders. Keeping guys involved, keeping guys accountable, keeping guys in their spots, taking over games, closing games, making sure everybody touches the ball. And Devin Booker has been in and out, but he has been a solid scorer, the lethal assassin, getting buckets, scoring, doing whatever he can. Also been a solid defender. I give him credit this year, and just continue to improve on his confidence. He know how good he is, and it's just good to see him. But this team has had injuries and problems. Guys like Aiden and guys other than throughout this roster have really messed up. But they have, whether it's Bismack Biyombo, whether it's Cameron Johnson, whoever starts, they just don't make excuses. They just keep going out there hooping and playing with what they have and going out there and winning. So whether it's Bismack Biyombo at center, DeAndre Ayton at center, whether it's Cameron Johnson starting, Cameron Payne starting for Chris Paul, even like we seen in the playoffs last year, they just kept winning. They kept their head up and kept playing basketball, and they just kept fighting. So Phoenix shows you that they just a great team. Like I said, we look at this team as a solid, legitimate team, all-around team, and they have shown that throughout this entire season, that not only as they are as good as we thought. They was number 2 last year in the entire NBA, and they come here this season number 1 in the entire NBA. So they picked up where they left off. They blew it in the finals, and they came back showing that, we are as good as we thought. Now we just have to see how they finish this season and what they do in the playoffs this year. Golden State, 38-13. They fell off a little bit. Draymond been out. Klay come back. It's good to finally see Klay Thompson. I know that guy. He's been waiting to know what I feel about him, but he's been solid. Like I said, he come off 2 major injuries, misses a load of time before he even plays a game, comes in and starting, hasn't been terrible. Hasn't looked like an all-star or superstar like I thought, but he also hasn't been as bad as a lot of people thought that he would be. So Klay, is just good to see him back in the league. Good to see the Splash Brothers back together. Good to see them playing off of each other, enjoying each other again, as they trying to win their last couple of titles before they're gone out of Golden State in retirement. But Draymond hasn't been back. That's their anchor. and a lot of their guys are been good. So this team is deep. You know, they got a lot of wings, they got a lot of shooting, they got some spacing, they got some creators, they got some athletes with Kuminga and Gary Payton down there. Andrew Wiggins has been an all-star starter, really has put in a lot of work, became a solid defender, been a better three-point shooter. He usually comes and goes as a three-point shooter. This has been his most consistent three-point shooting season in his entire career. And that just shows you that he has continued to put in the work. He has done what people thought that he wouldn't do. A lot of people thought that he couldn't change or he couldn't improve, and he proved everybody wrong. This is the best chance Andrew Wiggins has as winning the title, and I feel like he's taking advantage of it. We just have to see if he actually can get it done, and that's the toughest thing to do. But we also got to see how it plays out. The Grizzlies have really had a breakout season for them. They got off to a great start in the beginning of the season, and then they kind of came back to earth. Then Morant went down, and then they went on a win streak without him, and then they've been winning with him. So this team is interesting. Jaren Jackson has been a solid player for them. Foul still a lot, still not as great as a defender as people give him credit for. He's getting up there, but still not there yet. Still got to work on that physicality. Still got to work on that body. Still got to work on rebounds, and he hasn't been as aggressive offensively, and you know that has been a problem. Bane has been a great support player, being able to hit mid-range and some threes, and just really been a solid player. Ja Morant, we figured when he got drafted that he'd eventually become an all-star. Now he has finally been an all-star. I thought that he'd be an all-star this year. Obviously, you watched my videos early in the season, and he has finally got that season, you know, to get Memphis where they needed to be, which is third in the West. So we'll see where they finish. You know, this team, I still don't look at them as this great, amazing team. That's why I didn't have them finishing this high. But also things happen, you know, throughout the season. Injuries happen, trades happen. You never know what's going to happen until the season is over. And then the playoffs is the same story. So Memphis has finally took off and made it to the top of the West. Now we just have to see, can they keep it up? Is it real? Is it fake? We won't know until the season is over. And even then, it don't really matter if you're a third seed if you don't do much in the playoffs. And that's the problem with the Jazz. The Jazz got off to a great start. A lot of us thought they was going to be great, and they are. They had injuries to guys like Ingles, and Gobert missed some time and stuff like that. But they continued to win and continue to stay top 4 in the West. So it's not really a surprise that they still at the top of the West. They had problems just like everybody else, and they continue to work through them. And now they just got to figure out what they are. You know, guys been out. Guys are coming back. Now they're going to finish out. We got to see how they're going to finish out this season. So this team, we knew would be good. They're always good in the regular season, and they just flame out in the playoffs. Like I said, position don't matter because Utah was the #1 team in the entire NBA last year, and they didn't even make it to the NBA Finals. So, you know, or even the conference finals. So that's going to be the consistent problem with this Jazz team and other teams. You can finish great in the regular season. It's about where you finish in the playoffs, because that's the whole point of getting good position so you can make a good run to eventually win the title. So Jazz fans, y'all got off to a good start. Y'all having another great season. Y'all probably going to have home court advantage again, but we still have to see what they do in the playoffs. And not having Ingles and stuff like that and being an inconsistent team. One minute they look like they got it all figured out. One minute they can't make a shot. One minute Donovan Mitchell showing off, showing he's a superstar. Then he looks like a star. Then he looks like an all-star. That's been the biggest story every single season for the Jazz. Don't seem like it's going to change that much this season. We still have to see. You know, obviously they got off to a rough start last month, and they already lost 5 in a row coming into this month. So Jazz fans, keep your head up. Nuggets fans, this season looked like it was all over for them as they was at the top of the West, and then Porter goes down and everybody started going down, and they just kept playing. You know, Jokic even went down at one point with COVID, and then he comes back and puts himself into the MVP conversation, and this team is just scraps. You know, whoever they can pick up, whoever they can play, they just went out there and said, you know what, just play a game, play a role, and we'll figure it out. And they literally have just put together, you know, some solid NBA players and really have rolled Jokic to the best of their ability. And even in the West, you know, this team is significantly above 500. This team is legitimately a playoff team without having that much talent. And it's really just because Mike Malone has really figured out, you know, what works with this team. You know, this team has continued to change, but they continue to find out how to win. This team has really been crazy. You know, this team, I just can't believe it. It looked like everything was just done for them. And then a month later, they fifth in the West. So it just show you that you have to go to war with what you have. Who's ever available, who's ever playing. That's who you have to, put your shoes on and try to go out and win with. And that's what they have done last year and the year before. And that's what they have done this season, and they have won doing it. So if people ready to go, they ready to go. If they not, you got to keep riding. And the Nuggets are, a great example of that. The Mavericks, Luka went down. They kind of faded. They got back up to the top of the West. A lot of us looked at the Mavericks as a team that can finish around where they was last year, and that's where they at. We didn't think that Jason Kidd would be a crazy improvement or a worse improvement, but it really just depended on Luka. This is like a Jokic team or, a Phoenix team, Golden State team, whatever. This team really relies a lot on Luka. If Luka's having big games and big nights, they're going to be in a lot of games. If he doesn't play like we seen, they're going to lose a lot of games. So Luka is the Supermax player. He is the all-star, the all-NBA player every single season, especially for the last 3 years. That if they make the playoffs, this will be the third. Luka has been amazing. He hasn't got off to that great start that we thought, but they was in the playoffs the whole time. And now he's really just launching where he's getting triple-doubles and 40 points every game and having fun, embarrassing, showing off, doing this thing. But these role players have stuck by him. A lot of this team is really just the same. A lot of guys that can make shots and make plays and, just, defend to the best of their ability. But, they scrappy. They went out there and just continued to play their game that they did the last 2 seasons. It obviously is a formula for success because they're doing it again this year. The problem with the Mavericks is, like I said, with the Jazz, the Nuggets, and the Grizzlies, it don't really matter what you do in the regular season when you have already done it before. It's about making progress. The Mavericks have been a first-round exit the last 2 seasons. Lucky for them, they don't have to play Kawhi Leonard anymore this year in the playoffs. But, that may be a great thing. But then again, we also have to see where they finish, who they play, and how that will go. So it's going to be interesting to see where this Mavericks team is at in the playoffs and if they can actually make progress and make it further than they did last year. If not, they had another great season. Luka had another great season, but it's the same result, which, we have to find out and see. Minnesota, they're 25-25. This is a team that I knew would be in the playoff contention, so it's not really a surprise to me. They've been in and out of the playoff race all season. 1 minute, it looks like they're going to be a play-in team, which means they still have an opportunity to make it. And 1 minute, it looks like they can make it. So we'll have to see. Like I said, their biggest problem is they have a lot of guys that don't play well every night. Anthony Edwards has games where he looks unstoppable. Then he have games where he can't make a shot. Karl-Anthony Towns have games where he looks like he's the best center in the league offensively. And then he has games where he doesn't even care if he scores the ball or takes over. Then you have guys like D'Angelo Russell. 1 minute he's getting everybody involved. 1 minute he's taking every shot. 1 minute he can't make a shot. So the biggest problem with Minnesota is they got a lot of talent. They just don't have a lot of consistent performers. A lot of guys you can really rely on. This is not a great defensive team. This is a team where a lot of talent and it has a lot of potential, but guys, you just don't know what you're going to get from every night. You don't really know who's going to have a big night, who's going to have a big game, who you're going to rely on to carry you throughout the game, who's going to close the game. And we have so many questions that just let you know what's the identity and what they're trying to accomplish is still unknown. But this team is still young. Making the playoffs is huge for a team like Minnesota because they're still trying to build and build every year. So making the playoffs is a step in the right direction. We still have to see if they're going to make it. But they still got some things they got to figure out, like I said, roster-wise, to make this team into a legitimate team in the West. Like I said, teams make it to the playoffs, don't make it the year. Teams make it to the playoffs, never do anything in the playoffs. None of that really matters. You want to have progress. You want to actually try to get to the finals and win something. So we'll see if Anthony Edwards and Towns can actually solidify themselves as a duo and make the playoffs. And then we can see what they can do, in the future. But that's the first step for them. And the Clippers, you got to give credit to Ty Lue. Ty Lue lost Kawhi Leonard. He lost Paul George. And his team is still in the playoff spot. I know they won game below 500, but this team has had a lot of chaos, the last whole year of 21 coming into 22 too, and they literally just keep on going. They just keep on going. So I really want to see where this team finish. Like I said, this team will be all for nothing if they don't make the playoffs. This team will be all for nothing if they're a first round exit at this point, but that's what I thought they would be. If Kawhi Leonard don't return, they really have no legitimate chance of doing much. If Paul George does return, they have a chance to lock up one of these playoff spots, but I don't really see them doing much anyway. So this is a lost season. This is a lost season for the Clippers, but it just shows you that they didn't just come into the season saying F it. They still went out there and competed. They still went out there and did whatever they can do as a unit. They got a lot of veterans. They got a lot of pride. They got a lot of guys that really can play in this league and really are real skill set players and play well off of each other. And they went out there and did what they could, whether they had Paul George, Kawhi Leonard or not. They still, did what they could do. So we'll see where this team finish. We'll see if they make it. We'll see if they actually, can lock up one of these spots when the season is over. But at the end of the day, this still might most likely be a lost season for the Clippers, which is unfortunate, but we already kind of figured that out when the season started. The Lakers, they have been probably a team where we didn't really know what they was going to be. The problem with the Lakers is like a lot of other teams, but they problem has been more legit, is nobody can get on the court at the same time. They haven't really had a lot of games with LeBron, AD, and Russ all on the same court. And when they haven't looked amazing or great offensively or defensively. And then that's the team that you're really going to rely on in the playoffs, and you haven't really played with them a lot, and you haven't really looked great with them anyway. And on top of that, a lot of these pieces just don't fit, don't have a lot of space in them, not have a lot of shooting, don't have a really, AD hasn't really had that dominant, season this year and hasn't even been able to stay healthy for a long period of time and isn't really looking interested either, even defensively, which is a surprise. And even LeBron has really gave it all this season, but it hasn't really mattered much when they're the 9th team in the Western Conference looking outside of the playoffs right now. So he's been scoring. LeBron still looks like he has it. LeBron still looks like he's one of the best players in the league, but, LeBron is about winning. He's about champions and championships, and he hasn't really solidified that this year. They've been fighting to be a 7 to 8 seed this entire season. So it's unfortunate. It's crazy. But even when they was healthy, they didn't look great or amazing either. So I still worry about this Laker team. They still have enough talent to where if they figure it out, they can be dangerous. But they also have a lot of problems inherently built. They also have a problem defensively. They also have a Russell Westbrook problem where he can help you win games or help you lose games. And you also have a problem with LeBron where he's going to do whatever he can and he's going to give you opportunity to win, and you just got to live with that result. So it is the factor that they still have enough to beat anybody. The problem is they just haven't been good even when they've been healthy. And the problem, too, is they haven't been healthy and they is old. So that doesn't help that problem either. But reality is when you can't have your best and highest played and most dominant players even playing dominant this year, which they haven't either, outside of LeBron, that's just a problem that has been consistent this entire season, and that's not something you should be happy about going into the playoffs if they make it, if you're a Laker fan. The Blazers, they're in the playing range, but no Dame. The season was basically over. They had Dame most of this year. He didn't really play great or amazing. This entire season, he had a little stint where he looked at like the old Dame, and obviously it didn't matter much because he went back out with an injury at this point. Simons has finally had a couple great games, and C.J. McCollum is back, and Nurkic and them still stayed, and, they haven't really looked great defensively, haven't really looked amazing offensively. Hasn't really, found their groove, haven't really had a great stretch of games in a row where they look like they can actually be legit. They always just look like a good team. Not great, not amazing, not contender, but a team that's still a team you got to respect. If you go against Portland, they're going to bring it. They're going to be tough. But when you can get scored on every time and you can't really defend and your best player not even playing at an all-star level, which he hasn't this year, then on top of that, he hasn't even played because he's had the surgery. Then you don't know when he's coming back. This might be the first year in Damian Lillard history of not making the playoffs as a Blazer, which this was the year that people didn't really know. Is Dame going to stay? Is he going to get traded? And this might be the first season that he's been on a roster where he's not actually going to make it to the playoffs. So we have to see, especially because we don't even know how he's going to be after the surgery, which he already had and he hasn't played since. And we don't even know when he's coming back. But this season could be one of the first legitimately failure season for the Blazers. The Spurs, they have been scrappy. They still, like I said, will be a team that's not going to win a lot of games. Not going to be great, but they still going to compete, still going to try to as hard as they can. They're young. They got a lot of pieces, Lonnie Walker and all these other guys like Derek White Jakob Portal and DeJounte Murray have really, showed that they can really be good pieces. They still got to figure out what they're going to do as an organization, who they're going to build around, what piece they need to build something around, and they just don't have those guys. They have a lot of guys that play similar positions, a lot of guys that have similar size, don't really have elite wings, elite bigs, or anything like that. So this is a team where they finally had that down season, but they can finally add a great piece, hopefully, in the draft. They can really change the trajectory of this franchise, which they only can do if they can trade, or they would have to do it through the draft, unfortunately. But that's the situation that they're in. I mean, they had to draft Tony, they had to draft Manu, they had to draft Tim Duncan, and David Robinson, and all those guys were drafted. So, that's the direction they're going to have to go in to get back to the top. We just have to see what happens with that. The Pelicans, no Zion. I told you they'll be bad with Zion. I told you they'd be bad without him. But they're obviously better with Zion. And the fact they didn't play one game don't seem like they're going to play any. This team has been bad. A lot of the problems with this team is they really don't have nobody consistently playing either. Like, this team has guys in and out of the lineup, guys not playing, guys sitting out. And on top of that, they don't defend. They can't score. They don't have spacing. They don't have shooting. This team has really just been bad. This has really been a season where the Pelicans already, to me, was expected to be an okay team at best. And now they just have been terrible. Like, this team has only won 18 games at this point, and they already just lost 4 in a row coming into this video. So the Pelicans, not too much. Like I said, this is a team where they have a lot of young guys. They have to see who fits and who doesn't, who they want to keep in, who they want to build around and continue to, give development time to. And that's their biggest key. Obviously, without Zion is more important now than ever, because if he does get traded or he does go or he's not a part of the future within the next 3 years, then these other guys get the opportunity to really play and really get their bruises early and see what they can really become, in the future as they continue to try to add pieces to this roster through the draft. The Kings have been disappointing. They fired Lou Walton, and a lot of people thought that was a good decision until you realize they're just as bad as they was with them, without them, if not worse. And that's mainly because they don't have a lot of talent. Marvin Bagley didn't really play a lot. De'Aaron Fox had a bad season, not getting to the free throw line as much, jump shot not falling as much. Halliburton has been solid for them, but he's more of a solid point guard, not a franchise-changing superstar point guard. It's a guy that's going to be productive, that's going to produce, set guys up, make shots, make the right decision. Then you got guys like Davion Mitchell was coming in as off night, but hasn't really had that season that we thought that he could. Has played minutes, has been a factor, but hasn't really been as great or as impactful to this team as guys thought that he would be. Has been solid, but hasn't been great. And, when you have your best players being out, Harrison Barnes got off to a hot start, then he cooled off. And then you look at other guys like Buddy Hield, that's great, shooting the ball, but also is not really great defensively. You have a problem when you can't stop anybody, you can't score enough points, you can't create enough shots or consistent flow, then you just collapse at that point. And this team coming into this video lost 7 in a row, so it's just not looking that great all season, and it's not looking great at this point. And this team is in a situation where they got a lot of good pieces. It's probably better off just getting rid of them, just starting from the bottom, because when you are already at the bottom and you have a lot of guys that's making a lot of money, and you already don't have nothing to really do with this team at this point because you're losing with all these players under contract. Plus, none of them really fit or play well together or really could contribute to any type of winning since they've been together, the last 4 seasons at this point. They kind of make you wonder, why is this team really even together? I questioned that coming into this year, and it's probably just more or less the truth at this point. The Thunder, I looked at them as going to be the worst team, if not the second. They're in the conversation for both, and a lot of it has to do with they just don't have nothing. A lot of guys that's still learning, developing, still trying to find out what they're good at, what they can get good at. And it's just a trial and error, crash and burn season where you don't really have no shooting, you don't really have no score, you don't really have reliable players outside of Shea. And if you only have one player that you can really depend on, and even he's taking tough and hard shots, and you don't have no inside force, you don't really have no creators outside of Shea that can create shots for others and create shots for themselves. Plus, you don't have guys that can knock down perimeter shots either on the perimeter. It's just a whole team of guys that's just on the roster trying to figure out where they're going to be and what they're going to be in the league. and that's just a recipe for disaster. And that's pretty much what the Thunder was going to be coming into the season. That's pretty much what they are. And then the Rockets, this team, we really didn't know what they was going to be. They had a lot of good young players that they drafted. Obviously, if you're drafting rookies, they're going to be bad because none of them really helped you win. And then Jalen Green, like I said, has had a worse season than we actually thought that he would have coming into this season. You also have the fact that Kevin Porter has been hit or miss, hasn't really been that point guard of the future, has been solving and figuring it out as the season has went on. But him and Jalen Green aren't great defenders. They don't have great size. They don't have consistent shooting or scoring abilities at this point of their career. So we still have to see if that's really going to be their backcourt of the future. It sounded good until you actually see how they play together. We knew about it a little bit when we see Porter last year, and now they forced him to play a completely different position than he played last season and role, and it's just a mess. Christian Wood has looked like a great acquisition until you realize this team is just as bad as the Detroit team he was on 2 years ago before he came to Houston. And now, since they're not that great and they don't really have much to do and a team that really fits around them, he's just a guy that's just scoring and putting up numbers, but he does provide spacing at the center position. Then you just got a bunch of solid role players that probably is better off on another team or getting bought out than playing the rest of the team with a team that's not going to accomplish or do much. And other than that, this season has been what I thought. I thought the Rockets and the Thunder would be the worst teams in the West, and they have literally been the worst teams in the West. So that's not really a surprise to me, but it is something that's fun and interesting. Other than that, Quinn Wade, basketball analysis, signing out. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the rest of y'all day. This is the rundown, and I'll be back to y'all, when I get to y'all. Other than that, Hoopers keep, hooping, doing y'all thing, and enjoy the season. It's been long. We almost halfway. We halfway through at this point, and now we really just got to see, who can put together that run, who can take over this season, and who can really, let that imprint and let people know that we're the team to beat. So far, it's been the Suns. We just got to see what that team is going to be in the East.